Week 1 of the Formula 1 2019 winter testing has been and gone. A crazy thought, isn't it? It's bizarre that testing is already here. It's crazy to think we've seen all of the cars, all of the drivers in their teams for 2019. We're now 4 days away until the season properly starts. Well, what I mean by that is we've got 4 days left of testing, and then the next official Formula 1 event is going to be Melbourne, which is brilliant. It really is. And Formula 1 fever is catching absolutely everyone at the moment, which is brilliant. We've seen plenty of fantastic looking cars this year. There's one of my particular favourites, that McLaren, looking very nice this year. But today I'm going to be going through a little roundup of testing, have a look into next week, sure, but the primary focus is to look back at the week we have just had. So a lot of people always wonder, what can we actually take away from testing? Because obviously we talk a lot about things such as sandbagging, teams not pushing to the max, different programs they're on. So can we really look into testing? Well, a lot of people will say no. And primarily, I would agree with that. But there's still certain indicators that can give us a good idea on how teams are going to perform this year, as well as if a team is really going to surprise. And actually, there's a few teams that people are expecting to make a big jump further up the field this year, which is brilliant, to be perfectly honest with you. Throwing it out there straight away, I think we all know which team are going to be at the back early doors in the season, but I want to have a little chat a little bit later on about them, because I don't think they're quite as doomed as everyone seems to think they are. But let's get into some numbers, some real stats. So these are the top 11 times we saw over testing. It was Nico Hulkenberg who actually got the fastest time of all, a 1:17.3. Expect those times to get even quicker in the second week. Maybe, if we're lucky, sneaking into the 1:15s, but I think that'd be quite optimistic. But you never know. It could happen. Second and third, the two Toro Rosso boys of Alex Albon and Daniil Kvyat, they got a 1:17.6 and a 1:17.7. All three of those times so far on the C5 tyre. Kimi Räikkönen had the fourth fastest time, again on the C5 tyre, the softest compound that was brought to testing. Ricciardo was behind him in fifth. Renault and Toro Rosso both looking particularly impressive on these timesheets, but disclaimer, this particular stats is more just for fun. It's more just for us to look at it and see who had the quickest laps over testing, because you might see Hamilton down behind Valtteri Bottas, behind Daniel Ricciardo there. He's the highest number and place driver on the C4 tyres, and then you've got Leclerc and Vettel on the C3 tyres. So you could understand that Pirelli have officially said the gap between the hardest compound, the C1, and the C5 is about 2 seconds. So this leaderboard here doesn't really give us much information, but it's a little bit of fun for sure. We saw Norris in the top 10 as well, an interesting one there for McLaren. Moving on to this time set, this is the data for the fastest lap by each team. So Renault Hulkenberg, who got the fastest overall, then Albon second fastest, Raikkonen, Bottas got the quickest time for Mercedes, Leclerc for Ferrari, again on the C3 tyres there, so impressive. Bottas on the C5, so Leclerc just 6/10 off the pace of Hulkenberg, and considering he was 2 grades lower a tyre, that seems to be a very good performance from Ferrari, and we saw that all week long. Their long run pace, so the laps they were able to do consistently over a long amount of time, was really good, really impressive. So much so that many people are saying that by the time we get to Melbourne, they're going to be the team to beat. And I do agree with that, to be totally honest with you. Both drivers looking right on the ball. No complaints from either of them so far. We've had a few little murmurings that actually that Mercedes car might be, as quotation marks, a bit of a diva that we saw at the beginning of last year. Both Bottas and Hamilton saying that through some of the high-speed corners, that car isn't quite as stable as it might look. So maybe Mercedes aren't going to be the number one team in Melbourne. But this is one of the metrics I love to use in testing. I think especially for midfield teams and the midfield fight, this is one of the better metrics to look at, and that is total laps completed per team. And as you can see, Mercedes with the most, with 610 laps, then Ferrari with 598. Alfa Romeo 507. That's a cracking job for the team formerly known as Sauber. And actually, they're the team I mentioned earlier. That if you think about it, last year, or I suppose 2017, I'm thinking really, a backmarker team questioned if they were going to stay on the grid. And so far in this testing, not only have they launched an incredibly radical car that looks like it could completely blow everyone else away in terms of development, it looks like they could be the team to beat in the midfield. Many are saying that, you know what, Alfa Romeo, if they can actually string together a few good performances, they could be fourth. I mean, it's optimistic, but it could happen. And many believe as well, including myself, that they could get a few podiums this season. And that would be incredible for a team that have been through a lot the past few years. Behind Alfa Romeo, we have Toro Rosso, again, running off of last year. A really good amount of laps from them, 482. Red Bull, I know it's a little bit difficult to see there on screen, apologies, but Red Bull 475 laps completed, which is brilliant for them. I always think laps completed shows you more reliability of the car, which is why you can see Haas third from last. They had lots of reliability issues so far in testing, but Red Bull, new partnership this year with Honda, they needed laps. They're going to be chuffed with that. Likewise with McLaren, who are going into their second year with Renault, so they're going to be happy that they got some solid running in as well. But you can see at the bottom, 345 for Racing Point and just 88 for Williams. Now, I wanted to mention those two teams because I think looking forward to next week, which is what I really want to do now, I think they're the two teams, partnered with Haas. Haas have had a lot of issues, so is that good, is that bad? Well, you'd rather them happen now rather than in Melbourne, so in some cases that's positive. In some cases, the fact that one of the issues had been a fuel pressure issue which caused them to stop 3 times last week on circuit, that is a cause for concern, but at least they know that's somewhere that needs changing. So again, a positive, but they'll be hoping for a cleaner second week. 365 laps for Racing Point, that's something I'm a little more concerned about. Williams, we know the issues they had, couldn't get the car in on time. Yes, it's not ideal, but we've seen teams in the past show up to testing with year-old cars or just not show up at all. So the fact that they're there at the moment is fine, but they need a strong second week. I want to see them near-ish the top with laps. I want to see them trying to maybe do what Alfa Romeo did this week, Toro Rosso did this week, try and put in some quick laps if possible. But Racing Point, just mentioned I wanted to talk about them because they didn't have any issues this week, at least on the surface. No stops on circuit, no incidents for Stroll or for Perez in terms of running into the gravel. We saw a couple of spins from Stroll, but nothing in terms of hitting the barriers or anything crazy like that. So why was it they didn't do much running at all? They didn't hit a century of laps on any single day. Every other team, apart from Williams, were able to do that. So what happened there with Racing Point? Well, they are a team that historically don't really do a lot of testing, and last year especially, showing up to testing with a 2017 car, debatable. And I think a lot of people going into this season expected things to be different at Racing Point because they're now Racing Point. They're no longer Force India. So I think I was in that same bracket. I expected them to come out fighting because this midfield fight is going to be huge this year, and every single extra lap you can get now over your competitors will help you in the season. It doesn't matter what anyone else says, every single lap will count. So for Williams, this year for them is just about trying to build back up, but for Racing Point, a team that wants and is trying to be fourth, that's a little bit more questionable. Especially when you've got teams like McLaren, who for me, McLaren were a big surprise this week. I expected them to have a few more little technical issues that they've had over the past few years, but this has probably been the cleanest winter testing they've had, probably since 2012, I would say. So really positive vibes coming out of McLaren, but after week one, the running order, well, if I was to really hazard a guess, which again, you can't guess a running order, but if I was to do it right now, I think Ferrari are our top team. Some people say Red Bull, but I think Mercedes are still going to be number 2 with Red Bull in a tight third place. And actually, despite being a bit sceptical of that Honda engines in the Red Bull, actually, we could have a 3-way tie this year, which would be brilliant. Fourth, I think you're still looking at Renault, maybe Alfa Romeo or Haas on their day. Williams look pretty much dead last, to be totally honest with you. So going into week 2, keep your eye out for some of those lower teams trying to put in more laps, but we're going to have more crashes. We're going to have more crazy incidents, so keep an eye out for that. And for all your latest news, reviews and reports on winter testing, you'll get it right here. Like, subscribe, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.